Hi, everybody. My name is Bruce Lindsay, and I'm a professor of architecture here in the Sam Fox School. And it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight here on behalf of the lecture committee, as well as the faculty and students of the School of Architecture, Urban Design, and Landscape Architecture. Tonight's a special night because I get to introduce or sort of talk a little bit about two people, not just one. But first, let me suggest that we would like to remind all the students that they can confirm their attendance or by signing up at using the QR code at the exit. And somebody got the QR code? Okay. Well, we're going to work on that. But also, I think AIA credit is available, but it's wonderful to have you all here tonight. I mentioned that I get to talk a little bit about two people, although I'll be brief about our sponsor for tonight's lecture, Esley Hamilton. He's here tonight, and it's wonderful to have him here, but also on the occasion of the Historic Preservation Lecture, which he sponsors. It's a really important event, annual event, and also fantastic that we have our speaker, David Dowell, here tonight to offer this lecture. For more than 40 years, Esley, Dr. Hamilton, I might add, because he received an honorary doctorate in 2009 from UMSL, whose background is in urban planning, served as St. Louis County Parks Recreation Preservation Historian for nearly 40 years. And his passionate work has literally shaped the St. Louis we know through his belief in the value of buildings and their capacity to help us know who and where we are. It's an important legacy that we maybe shouldn't take for granted here in St. Louis. Perhaps he was in the right place at the right time as Missouri pioneered the use of historic tax credits to save neighborhoods and buildings. But perhaps more likely, he was certainly a part of that, and to all our benefit. For numerous years, Esley also taught courses on historic preservation here in the school and the history of landscape architecture. And in addition to supporting this lecture, he also supports a scholarship in the Masters of Landscape Architecture program. I got his bio, and it said semi-retired, and I just laughed because there's no way Esley can be semi-retired. And so I would invite all of you to join him tomorrow night at 6:30 at the Stedman Architectural Foundation Library. An amazing resource. If you don't know about it, look it up. It's unique to St. Louis, and it's an incredible thing. Open to the public. You got to sometimes make reservations, but go see this incredible library with one of an extremely unique and rare collection of architectural editions and a beautiful room to boot. And he will be talking tomorrow night at 6:30. It's streamed on Facebook about Ylio Saarinen, Finland, and America. So thanks, Esley. So I won't be long because I'm excited to introduce my friend and our speaker tonight, David Dowell. In big words, right on the first page of his website, I really love this. It says, we chase big ideas in the middle of everywhere. And while we may be in the middle of the middle, being in St. Louis and David being in Kansas City, I thought that was a wonderful phrase. I got to know David when I first came here 2007 or so, and I got to visit his office. And I was so inspired by the way in which he had organized his practice. And I'll say something about that here in a minute. But because he organized it around three interdependent parts: public art, fabrication, and architecture and design, with a real strong focus on urbanism. And so that's a unique structure for practice even today. But David is an alum. What year did you graduate? Oh, I happen to have. I knew that. I happen to have. David. One of the perks of being, able to access student files. So I read from an excerpt written by studio instructor then 1983. Ian Fraser, in which I quote, "David is a good student when you can get him out of the shop. He has an entrepreneurial spirit, which is to say that he does his own thing. He has strong representational skills, but was recently disciplined for throwing a computer down the stairs. Now, David, also, it's not really your student file, but I tried to find it. He also went on to get a master's degree at UC Berkeley. And he's a member of the AIA and has over 25 years of experience as a practicing architect and the founding partner of Dorado Architects in Kansas City. He's taught graduate level architecture studios across the world, including being a visiting professor here at WashU. He, in 2008, taught a studio as a visiting professor the same year that he won the school's Distinguished Alumni Award in 2008, so that's pretty cool. We've been teaching a studio together, students from K-State and students from here, WashU. The K-State students will be here tomorrow where we'll visit a project. I won't spoil the surprise, but about which David, I think, will talk a little bit tonight. And it's been a wonderful collaboration to have our students working together on a project here in St. Louis. A couple weeks ago, we traveled to Kansas City and had a wonderful few days visiting their office and seeing the incredible addition to the museum by Stephen Hole, among other things. I was going to cite his studio proposal, but I won't. I'll conclude by saying this. We, as part of our visit a couple weeks ago, had one of those, every 10 years or so you have those experiences that stick with you for another 20. And we had one where we and the students visited two people that he works closely with, two artists in Kansas City, one of whom was named Jim Woodfill. And Jim was talking about the way in which buildings mark time through the potential for them to reinvent themselves by accommodating different time periods in the course of their life as buildings, which is a little bit about what I think this lecture is about and what Esley's work has testified to over many, many years. And in that discussion, Jim asked David, what's his favorite project? And he answered in a way that I won't forget, which is that he said his favorite project is his practice. So please join me in welcoming David tonight.
For the record, I don't throw computers. Well, thanks, Bruce, and thanks, Esley, for making this possible. It's great to be here. Every time I'm here, I'm 18 years old again. So I don't feel gravity right now. Okay, so the project that Bruce referred to is the Crendon-Martin, we're calling it now the Crendons-Martin, south of the Gateway Arch. And I do want to talk about that project. The two final projects are well, here, I'm just going to jump into it. But if someone has an eye on their watch, I'd like to leave 10 minutes so 15 minutes before I should be over, I'd like to rush to that project, and then I'll talk about it for 5 minutes. So 5:30, 6:30, so at 6:15, could someone flag me? Because my office today was joking, I had 280 slides this morning, but I cut it down to 140, so we should be good. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Middle of everywhere since 1996. This is truly, we just got so tired of the middle of nowhere. At some point, we had to stop that idea that you could be based in the middle, the navel of North America, and somehow that was a bad thing. So we did work hard on the title. One history, two studios. If nothing else, it's been great to look back over almost 30 years of practice and realize that accidental preservationist is really the way I think about it. When Bruce, whoever asked me to give this lecture, I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm not a preservationist. Why do you want me to give the preservation lecture? But looking back over the history, I think actually we can make a case that we are. But on the left, this is a shot of the studio in Kansas City. On the right is our holiday party in Portland from just this past year. Super quick visual history. We started as furniture makers and evolved. All the architects in Kansas City were like, yeah, it's great, you're furniture makers. We thought at the time they were being supportive, but what they were really doing is reinforcing the fact that we weren't architects. So it took us about 6 years to figure that out, and we pivoted hard. But as a very kind of organic evolution in scale and complexity, to the point where now these are active projects in all these locations. And again, the asterisks in each of those cities, we're working on projects that I would consider to be preservation. They may not be pure by the book preservation, but they might be neighborhood kind of rejuvenation. It might be digging into, in the case of the work in Riyadh, really trying to understand how to build in a contemporary way that's at least mindful of some very traditional ways of thinking about building things. Too much to talk through, but these are the lenses that sort of formulated as I was thinking about the talk. The beginning, rural histories. We actually do a lot of preservation work in rural America. Material culture, as Bruce mentioned, we're really interested in how buildings are made. We make things. We've built our own buildings before, and we continue to have kind of a hands-on engagement that seems very relevant for the work of preservation. Compare, contrast, and the future. So the beginning, we started in a neighborhood in Kansas City called the Crossroads Arts District, wedged between downtown and Union Station. It was really a place where artists wanted to be and were. There were a lot of artists that owned buildings. We actually own our own building in the neighborhood, but we were there. El Dorado, the city of gold. Someone might ask where the name came from. One of the versions of the story is that we were trying to create in Kansas City the place we wanted to be. And it really had everything to do with this neighborhood. If you know Kansas City, that's the central business district up above, that's Union Station down below. The orange dots are all projects that we've had, new buildings, rehab buildings, exhibitions, and the green projects, or the green notations are public realm projects that we've worked on, streetscape projects, temporary carnivals, parades, et cetera. So it really, over 25 years, we've accumulated a lot of knowledge about the neighborhood. And these are not all in the Crossroads, but this is just kind of a collage of the rehabilitations and preservation projects that we worked on. I think the one in the middle is in Wichita. All the others are in Kansas City. On the left, Bruce mentioned that one of the pillars is working with artists. This was one of the very first retail restaurant projects in the neighborhood, and it had the developer trusted Jim Woodfill to develop these light signals before there was anything, before the buildings were renovated, before David Rockwell came and created our brand new Lydia's Restaurant. Jim's light sculptures were out in this field of corn that allegedly grew when a tub of corn fell from the rails. I don't know if it's really true, but before anything was there, anybody was there, Jim's work was there, and we helped him make sure that they didn't fall down. So we often will work with artists and we'll help them build their work. On the right was another early project, and I really love. We designed and built the staircase, which is something that we do quite a bit of. But for the true preservationists out there, I'm sorry, but we're often looking for these kind of moments where contemporary thinking and in equal measure with restoring historic fabric kind of exists side by side. We've worked on little Art Deco buildings. Across the street from the Art Deco building is the TWA building that I'll dig into in more detail, and this is bigger facade of just a really simple building, kind of a classic infill building. Couldn't tell you who designed it, but these are everywhere. I'm jealous every time I come to St. Louis. Our version, which is a little two-story version in St. Louis, is 12 stories tall and phenomenal. So, and I now live in the Hotel Monroe across the street. So I want to dig in a little bit on the TWA building. This is the glorious opportunity that a client of ours presented us with. This is what the building looked like. It was so effectively camouflaged, nobody ever knew it was here. And somehow, this developer had seen these photographs from the 1950s. And I mean, he basically took the building. It was the first, I believe this is true, it was the first mid-century modern building to be listed that went through the state and federal historic tax credit program in the state of Missouri. It was dates from 1956, and we started renovating it it wasn't quite 50 years old, but because of the corporate history, the significance of TWA to Kansas City, it was allowed in early. This is, so really it was a kind of a recladding. Actually, it's more complex than it seems, but recladding. These are the floor plan differences between essentially the alleyway cut the building in half. So the floor plates weren't, this is a big building for the Crossroads. It's 30,000 square foot floor plates, but it didn't work with the alley splitting it. So we joined it and then kind of went about our business, created a new entryway, this kind of iconic building in a neighborhood of brick buildings, 50 foot wide, 100 foot deep brick buildings. That's the context of the Crossroads. Tim Hursley photograph.
Did you rebuild the rocket?
We did. We did. So thanks for the question. So the owner of the rocket was an attorney in Columbia, Missouri, and the developer was desperate to have it. Just, what do you want? I'll give you anything. And he said, you don't get it. It's mine. I have it. It's mine. He took it to shows and Walt Disney appreciation events all over the country. He said, but if you want to come and measure the rocket, come and measure the rocket and rebuild it. I mean, it was a piece of shit. The original was like not in good shape. So we did. We went out and measured it and had it rebuilt. It's the Moonliner rocket. It was Howard Hughes and Walt Disney were on the board of TWA at the same time. Howard Hughes, they all felt that TWA was going to commercialize rocket travel. So while they were on the board, they plunked the building down on the corner. What's interesting to me is this is a spec office building, and TWA became a tenant, and because of the color coding and because of the rocket, it has all this kind of significance. But the biggest problem with the building, the floors were concrete poured on top of each other and then hydraulically hoisted and then kind of welded into place, which is great. Went up in no time. Then the ribbon windows go in. But the roof was perfectly flat. And because we were so clever to get it on the National Register, we couldn't alter the profile of the roof. So the roof had to stay flat, and we're like, well, we can't responsibly carry this building into the future with a leaky roof. So we discovered Hydrotech's garden roof system, which essentially, as the plant material gets wet, it pushes down on the water and hydrostatically evacuates the water. So it was the only solution to the problem that we could find. And in exchange for that, we got a prairie on the roof, the largest planted roof in Kansas City at the time at 25,000 square feet. So signature moments, this is the tallgrass prairie on the north roof. And on the left, the project made it on the cover of the National Trust Guide to Tax Advantages Rehabilitation. Berkeley, who's a large company-owned advertising company in Kansas City, they rebranded themselves around the building. This is how they're great tenants. They've been there for as long as the building's been renovated. Crossroads Hotel, this is another, that was a proper historic tax credit project. This one is too. It's essentially, it was 2 buildings, and then it was 6 buildings, all kind of aggregated around it. Just a mess, a total mess. And really, it was the last big building in the neighborhood to be acquired and rehabbed. This is what it looks charming, but the metal, the beams and columns aren't connected. They're just resting. And the wooden beams aren't physically connected to the walls. They're just sitting there. So it was, and we were basically kicking the building to make it work as a hotel, which wasn't very nice to do, but we did it. This was an early vision, light touch on the outside, significant reconfiguration on the inside, so that I don't know if you can tell from the plan, but there's at least 4 different buildings kind of stuck together, and then we just cut this giant hole in the middle of the building for light and to allow each of the pink shapes is where we needed to get light to every room. So that's the space on the left, and what we did in the meantime, because this was all covered up, we revealed the back of the original building inside this big courtyard space. So it ended up being a really really beautiful opportunity to show people the way that the building was assembled over time. Weird columns like this, we just said, the columns win. The walls we don't want to screw it up, although I noticed that just left of the register, it looks like we crowded that piece of the column, but we really were interested in trying to find a nice way for what we need now to rest easy with what was existing. So that's before and after. Another thing that we do, we run the hotel has an artist residency program that's run with now the director of the Contemporary Art Museum of Houston, who was a partner of ours for a little while. We had a curator who was a partner for 2 years, and every 3-4 months there's a new artist in residence who has a show, and it just keeps when you walk into the building, the gallery is to the right and the bar is to the left, so you've got everything you need. Rural histories. I'm gonna run through this really quickly because I feel like I'm not moving quickly enough. Who's gonna? Okay. We do so. A partner of mine was asked to teach a studio at K-State by the dean, by Tim DeNoble, and without consulting his partners, he agreed to do it. He hadn't taught before, and not only was it a big challenge to begin with, but it was a design-build studio. So he said, well, why don't you run a studio modeled after El Dorado? And he's like, yeah, okay, no problem. So we thought, okay, well, I'd taught a little bit. I'm gonna run with him. 3 weeks into the semester, Doug said, I'm out. I'm not doing this. I don't want to teach. So I've been doing it nonstop since 2011. One of the great things about it, going out to Manhattan, which in the middle, it's really in the middle of everywhere. It's in a beautiful landscape, and there are all these like amazing little jewels of towns and stories all throughout the Flint Hills of Kansas. So here's, for those of you who don't know, Manhattan is about 2 hours west of Kansas City, and Volland is a town of 1 person now. It used to be 2. There's just 1 person. And a client of ours managed to essentially buy all of the buildings in Volland, which sounds like a big thing, but there's like 6 buildings. And the reason that she bought the building is that there's an archive. The owner of the building who built it was a photographer. And this is like August Sander era photography. He documented the building from the beginning all the way through the life of his 75 years. There's a photographic record. So we knew everything about the building. It's a brick building in a land of limestone, and that's because it's a railroad town. So the bricks were just sort of pushed off the train, and the building was incredibly well built. And he documented the social life of this little town, which was essential to the function of this part of the world at the time. But it didn't last, and this is, not unlike the Brown building that you saw. This is the opportunity we were presented by our client. that's her. She's smiling in all the photographs, and the guy just to the left of her in the middle is the interior designer, who is a really friendly, happy guy, George Turbovich, but he's never happy in any of the photographs that I have of walking through this building. But we saw it as, neglect as inspiration. That's like, ruin porn. That's not what I'm talking about. It just, there was something about the quality of the space once we had cleared it out. And Patty wanted us to build it back exactly the way that it was. And so we spent a lot of time in that volume saying, it would be amazing if from the outside, people think it's just a general store, but on the inside, it's something bigger, something unexpected. So this is now a cultural arts center with really robust programming inside and outside. They have rodeos, they have plays outside. It's really become an important part of the community again. But this is what we do. We make things. So we fabricated all of the structural steel for the building, this is the alpha test of the Crundon Martin West building, which you might all know downtown, that's been burned out. It's a bigger version of the Vollen store, essentially. But we have 2 architects who are structural steel welders as well. And like that, just that, like, love that detail. The tension, there's a torsion ring with tension ties in the middle, and Chris couldn't stand the idea that these cables would rub. So one weekend he went out and milled his own spacer to make sure that the cables wouldn't rub. This is amazing. This is 100 years apart. On the left, that was the town of Volland, and on the right, these are all, with the exception of me and Patty and Jerry Reese, who own the building, everybody in the photograph has a relative who was in that photograph on the left. So there it is. I'll never forget, Carol Ross Barney was a jury of AIA Kansas City Design Awards one year, and she loved this project and said, architects need to do this more often. Like, you can't even tell the architect was there. There's light touch, and it's exactly right. Another project in the country, this is a little bit more, well, we wanted to make sure that the original, it's actually not the original house, but the signature house was not overwhelmed by an addition on the back, which is much bigger just based on the size of people. This is the location of the house. It's right in the middle of that's what was originally the tall grass prairie in North America, and that darker green section is what's left. There's 4% left, and we're right in the middle of it. This is where I spend my weekends. So I never really get tired of the landscape. But I really love this idea of approximately similar, same shape, same form, roof pitch is a little bit different, but basically when people squint, they're like, oh yeah, it's the same building. That's the interior. We gutted the original house, just opened it up, and that's the bedroom. It's a beautiful space, and that's the kind of the partner in crime in new construction. It really is, the vertical section is designed around the scale of people and moving upstairs. There's also, windows, light, really important. People that were out here were running from the wind, which is maddening. But we were really, the light quality is really amazing. And the new building is essentially a light tube that opens up to that big window on the corner. And when you're upstairs in the guest loft, you have a really, really great kind of light condition. But subtle contrast and direct dialogue, little punched windows, one big window, metal, stone, et cetera. It just kind of never get really tired of it. But craft is everywhere. The front corner of the building, of the house, the historic house, the craftsmanship is okay. It's not like some of the other buildings in the area, but the corners are dressed and they're perfect. They're in perfectly good condition. So we felt like we needed to do a version of that on our own, which was using 2x12 Doug fir recycled in a well-crafted way, and then a nice handrail designed and built by Dorado. Material culture. So we do have an in-house steel fabrication shop. These are different people, including clients, over the years. It's a really simple shop. We don't have any digital fabrication equipment. We have a cold saw, MIG welders, TIG welders, a drill press. It's really simple. But we also we move out into other. We don't just do steel things. We work with wood. These are students of mine in the center up above, building an enormous 250-foot long, 15-foot high dry stack limestone wall out in the tallgrass prairie. On the upper left is the kind of signature staircase for our local public television station that we just finished. Okay, so this was a student project. This is in Vollen, Kansas too. It's a kit house. Pushed off the train right by the Vollen store and thrown up. We didn't really know what to do with it. There's context for you. There's the Vollen store. There's house number 1. So it seemed like she didn't know what to do with it. We didn't know what to do with it. It seemed like a perfect project for students. So essentially the students, went after it. They found out which exact project it was or which product it was. They also verified every piece of wood is labeled. So as we were demoing the project, we couldn't find the guidebook, but we verified that it was in fact a kit house. So there were 15 students in 2 semesters that renovated most of the building. Really simple floor plan, same idea on the inside, kind of gutted the building on the inside. There's a utility core, and then it's just volume. So that's the building on the left. There's one little piece of kind of contemporary thinking on the outside of the building, and that's because it's where the kitchen is, and it has a view back over the town. But on the inside, when you walk in, everything's vaulted and opened up. And that same detail, this is an homage to Chris Burke. They get their tension tie to make sure that the walls don't fall down. And they got a milled spacer in there as well. And then the students helped design the window, and unfortunately they all ran away, and we ended up building the window. I spent most of COVID working from here. It was really great. So it's just classic, American classic, not symmetrical. Okay, and then scale shift. I don't want you to think we just work on little things. This is a whole block in downtown Denver. And we worked with Boca Powell as the architect of record. So for context, there's a whole block. There's a piece of a building left in the middle of the block that's the Regional Transit Authority. But Gale Studio worked with our client on a urban design framework, which essentially, that's a 16th Street Mall, and then the street that butts into the Union Station, and our block was a perfect opportunity to create a kind of a crisscross pattern. And Denver has these amazing alleyways that split the blocks, but they're used for trash and stuff like that. And Gale said, well, wait a minute, why don't we turn it into something like this, and basically you don't have retail and kind of street level activation just on the perimeter. You can run it around each one of these little buildings. We had to deal with the Lodo Design Review Committee, which we thought, they were like, well, what are you doing with brick? I'm like, well, what about this and steel? Or what about this and, well, what are you going to do in brick? What about this and glass? And what about, we were totally avoiding the use of brick. And then finally we just said, you know what, they're not going to let us. This is why, accidental, reluctant preservationists are we. But no, we really, once we embraced the notion that it had to be made of brick, we went crazy and started working with the Gallegos brothers, masons, really great masons in Denver. That's our client. We learned a lot of things. Like in school, we always learned you can't have a brick cantilever like this because ice and, it's bad for the brick. if the brick is well made and you make sure that the cavity, the wall cavity, drains properly, of course you can do this. So we were like, this is amazing. 20 different patterns, and we went kind of berserk with the patterns. But what we learned, the city of Denver said, this is great. We love that you now love brick, but we have rock climbers, and you can't do this on your building in downtown Denver. So for the first 12 feet, it's some other pattern, and then we're able to do what we wanted to do up high. But we really did. It was just a very systematic kind of investigation of what's possible. There's the finished plan with the interior space, which is now called Base Camp. And then up above, it's housing and office space. Okay, how are we doing on time?
Just a few more minutes.
Okay, so compare, contrast. So this is a story about gangsters in downtown Kansas City. And the River Market was you've seen Fargo and Ozark, like the mafia in Kansas City is a real thing. And they had a lot of activity in the River Market, which is this neighborhood right up against the Missouri River. You see the empty lots are not knocked down for parking. They're buildings that were either blown up or that fell down. The site that we built on, somebody cut a secret passageway between two buildings, didn't treat the lintel properly, and the building collapsed. So when we started working on the project, we were dealing with an empty lot, and everybody was freaked out. This was one of the very first new infill buildings in the River Market, and people knew who we were, accidental preservationists, reluctant preservationists, and they were sure we were going to screw it up. So, we really looked carefully at things like window patterns and openings and just the rhythm of the buildings and the scale. And lo and behold, when the building was finished, everybody said, "This is great. This is the standard. This is what we need." So, and this is probably 20 years old, no, 18 years old. So I think it's holding up actually pretty well. Compare, contrast. This is the Boulevard Brewery. In a classic kind of turn-of-the-century building. They were growing like mad. They needed to add space for more tanks. They couldn't shut anything down. They had, we knew where it was going to go, but we had to pop something on top of the building to make the space. And the building is a kind of a solid masonry building with no openings. And we thought, well, we're gonna make the addition something. We're gonna contrast the new with what's existing. I'm going to run through this quickly, but it's essentially we call it a cathedral to beer. It's very carefully calibrated so that the thermal heat gain is negligible. It brings really great light down into the depths of the brewery, and at night it becomes this kind of beacon to what they do. We were also the general contractor on this project. We understood the logistics of moving the steel in and out so well that at one point the owner said, "Well, you guys have been talking about this forever. Why don't you just build it?" So we said, "All right, we'll do that." And we did. And this is a system that, a facade system or a way of thinking about layered facades that has become, you'll see it in other projects as well. But the section's just really beautiful. It's a really nice project. The future. Okay, so this is our most recently completed project. This is 300 Kansas in Potrero Hill in San Francisco. It's a manufacturing building, and it's the first strictly manufacturing building in the city in a generation. And because of that, the city was it took 4 years to get a building permit, which is crazy, but that was expedited. Normally it would take longer than that. So we were happy about that. But that's the building. It's right next to the highway. That's Kansas Avenue. I can't remember what street that is. Anyway, really early on, we were like, well, we're in San Francisco. What are we going to do that makes it a San Francisco building? Bay windows. And there's a zoning incentive with bay windows that allows you to build out over the property line. So we thought, that's what we're going to do. And there were two ideas that were really important. Number one, It's a factory manufacturing building. We don't want to do a sawtooth roof because that it just seems inhumane. Let's think about bay windows on the side of the building. And oh, by the way, if we can do that, take that, turn it on its side, we can leave the roof open for a garden. So those are the bay windows, and the city bought it. We were able to extend big chunks of the building out over the property line. Those are our bay windows. You can see the bay windows in plan. There's the rooftop garden. There's the east facade. There's the rooftop garden. The inside spaces are really beautiful. I mean, it doesn't ever really get too hot in San Francisco. Okay, so Crendon Martin, perfect timing. Here we are. This is a section through the Crendon Martin building. So west and east. Is Greg here? There's Greg. That's our client, Greg Gleischer with Good Developments Group. Snuck in somewhere along the line. I told Greg I was going to say whatever I wanted about his project. But the sections are great. I love the sections of this building, especially on the far left, which is the building that's been burned. So we get to have, this is a proper preservation project. I'm going to mention it here. This is our team across the bottom. I want to make sure to give everybody credit. Trevor's is working with us, KPFF, IMEG, Castle, Lamar Johnson, Arup, Henning Larson, Perrick, everybody. And it takes everybody to get this project done. We just submitted 100% construction drawings, and construction begins in June.
Initial construction,
End of the month. So it's happening. It's really happening. We've been working on this for a while. I'm going to run up, Greg, I'll do the best I can here, but this is the vision of GDG for this district, which is a master plan development strategically connected to river, rail, and road distribution. It's really, when I first met Greg, he talked about it as a construction innovation district, which, as we thought about it more, meant it's also a design innovation district and an education and a community innovation district. All those things have to work together if this is going to be successful. But it really is, St. Louis, in many ways, St. Louis and Kansas City are similar, although you have the benefit of the Mississippi River, which has a bigger reach. But it's really strategically positioned for advanced manufacturing or even just manufacturing. Greg can tell you this story, but what's wrong with this picture? As we've moved through time, it's taken longer and longer and longer to build buildings. And there's some good explanations, but the general point is just the question about what the hell's going on here. Because that means money. Time is financing cost and money, and something is sort of off in the way that we build. So a watershed moment for the architects in the crowd. I mean, in the last couple of years with inflation and the cost of borrowing and the cost of materials, we're at a breaking point. In every way, in every industry, in every typology, there's trouble. So Gateway South offers the promise of, really attacking some major systemic problems. This is our diagram where we added art and design, community, and education into the mix. And this was our version when we were trying to convince Greg that we were worth it. We overperformed and went ahead and master planned his district for him. These are amazing. And the show that was at the Pulitzer, Michael's show, not too long ago, just the amount of devastation that St. Louis has experienced is just, it's heartbreaking. But here's Crendon Martin kind of hanging on. I don't know if any of you were here when it burned, but it's miraculous that it's still standing. I think a tribute to the craft of the building, the masonry craft. Our Joe Carpenter is our structural engineer with KPFF, and we're all freaked out and worried, and he's like, no, we're good. I love the plan too. Like there's this rail spur that runs into the middle of the bigger building, and that becomes the entry to the building. So you basically enter through these little doors, little kind of passageways, and everybody funnels into this, we call it the spur. It's just an amazing building. I mean, there's nothing special about it, and there's everything special about it. You guys have amazing buildings. These are few and far between in Kansas City, but they're everywhere here. This is the transverse section, which I love too. These are two of the entryways to the north and the south. This is the amazing space. This is what, if you go to the building now, this is what you see on the right. It's been lidded over. It's kind of hard to tell what it is, but it's this amazing Italian hill town in the middle of a building in St. Louis. So that becomes the core entry space and circulation space for the building. And we've organized circulation on the upper floors around this space. And there's a sky bridge that connects you to the other building as well. Whoops, went the wrong way. These are what the corridors will look like. This is the entry on the riverside. The arch really isn't there. The arch is a little bit to the left. For those of you who are nitpicking, I'll just cut you off right now. Just an amazing history. It was always a manufacturing building. They manufactured helmets. They manufactured paper lunch bags. There's a great story about Charlie Chaplin, and they wanted to get Charlie Chaplin's likeness on a bag, and they had to ask Charlie Chaplin for permission, and they eventually got it. But it's an amazing history. So the benefit of the building having been burned, is we get to do this with it, and they're all creditable expenses. So we're just really excited about this space. So this is like the next level Vollen store. The people that worked there, and so this is just a quick sample. This is some of our work with Bruce's studio and my studio at Kansas State, where they're making material cubes, which sounds really simple, sounds like a first-year problem, but they've really done some amazing things, and they've learned a lot about like the weight of aluminum. And in the middle, last semester, we spent time trying to consider where the material library might be. This semester, we're focused on the students are essentially the first occupants of the material library, and what do they need? How do they work? Okay, so I just wanted to close on this slide because I love the triptych of stewardship, ethos. This is a public service announcement from the 80s from the National Trust. There's a lot of the greenest thing you can do is nothing, first of all, and then the next greenest thing is rehab an old building. And ARUP is helping us really understand some of the metrics around what we're doing in terms of carbon footprint and embodied energy continuation. In the middle, craft quality. This is the stair that we built, a little glimpse of it. But just like the idea of craft, 100 years after the original building was built, out of masonry, how those things come together. And on the right, this is a building in Kansas City that Mac Properties hired us to renovate. Sometimes it's just as simple as a contemporary light fixture in a historic space. So this idea of a handshake across time is something that really, if we have bread and butter work, it's rehabbing old buildings. So after almost 25 years of being an architect, I'm really happy that that's our bread and butter work. But we really are accidental preservationists. We never set out to do this in a proper way, but I think we've done a good service to our historic buildings. So that's it. Questions? Yeah.
This is regarding the kit houses.
Yeah.
We just bought a house for my mother, and the walls are non-existent. They don't seem to have. Do you have any advice for hanging things on those walls in the kit houses before we get into the deep end of the pool?
Well, I would recommend, first of all, that if it's really properly a kit house like this.
I don't think there's that kind of framing. It's so thin. We haven't gotten into it, but.
Well, so the perimeter framing should be different than the interior framing. And what we learned is the the interior stuff is all, it's not load bearing, it's throwaway. So we thought, let's throw it away. But then that's when we needed the tension ties to make sure that the walls didn't pop out. But then once we did that, we're like, what do you need on the inside to live comfortably?
The grab bars in the bathroom, and it just went straight through to the other room, like the screw went straight through to the other room, so.
Yeah, you have to rethink your walls. Yeah, that's my advice, rethink your walls. Yeah, uh-oh.
The fact that you guys do metal fabrication, how has that affected how you design buildings, if at all?
Greg asked, how has steel fabrication influenced the way that we think about designing buildings? Well, I mean, so the reason we started to do it, we were tired of really nice handrails being VE'd out of every single one of our projects when we were working for somebody else. So we said, we're gonna figure out why that keeps happening. So I think it's focused our attention on a couple of things that people touch: staircases, handrails. Really, we do those things over and over and over again. So it gives us a sense of kind of human scale in connection. I mean, the building can do whatever it wants, but we're always thinking about human scale. The other piece is we think about time. We think about sequencing. We think about the order of things. When we were our own general contractor, we did it for about 5 years, and once we started, we couldn't stop until the projects were built. And they all turned out well, no problem. Nobody got hurt, and they're all built, and they're actually really beautiful buildings. But our architects were asking us, why am I chasing down the sheetrock guy? Like, is that really the best way to spend my time? And we're like, yes, it is, for a little while. So generally, there's a respect for the sequencing of how things happen, and also the people that do the work. And as you know, if we're fortunate enough, Greg will allow us to build a significant portion of the Division 5 metal work in his building, but we have to be competitive, which we rarely are. So I don't know if that, I mean, at the scale, or like human scale, and also an appreciation for time and the sequencing and craft of buildings. And I think it makes us, that understanding makes us really curious about how these the historic buildings are built. I mean, sometimes we go a little too far and we tear things out, but I mean, in the end, the interior of that house was pretty unlivable. The rooms were as big as this lectern, so people don't live that way anymore. People were smaller then. So, we're able to really, just with a couple of, I love the plan. It's just like you insert one piece of infrastructure and it organizes. You've got utility room on the back, you have privacy for the bathroom on the left, you have a kitchen, living room, and bedroom, all defined by just that insertion of one cube into the space. And it just makes for really, the interior space, just sitting in here all day during COVID and watching the light come in and move around the space was incredible. I want to know who's going to make a 2x2 cube of light. That's what I'm waiting for. Nobody's taken on that challenge yet. Yeah.
James Strauss coming next week. He's going to show students how to do it.
Okay.
A follow-up to the craft
Yeah.
/ the change over time and how long it takes to get stuff built, which you're responding to, I think, really exciting, this innovation.
Yeah.
How do you marry the fact that it's going to be, hopefully, we'll go from 10 years to 2 years, but we want to maintain craft in the future of construction?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there are people in the room that are probably better equipped than I am to. That question terrifies me, keeps me up, because we're engaged in slow craft, handcraft. And if we were in Mexico, we would have a bright future, perhaps. But here, I think the speed and I mean, it's, we have to, the answer is we have to engage. We have to engage in the process, and we are. We have a client in Portland, Project PDX, and he has his own manufacturing plant. It's a panelized system called Madomi, and we are helping him to figure out how to make that work and not sacrifice craft. I didn't show it, but because it's not preservation, but we've done a number of modular houses that are modular housing that is stacked up. We were going to work on a 300 unit project at Cortex, but it got canceled. But we did an 80 unit project in Kansas City, and the craftsmanship of building something in a warehouse like this, you don't have to worry about weather. Like people are. The craft tends to be better. Inspections happen in a controlled environment. The craft is really good. So it's promising, maybe. Yeah.
David, thank you. This is great. Learn more about you.
Thanks.
As a professional in historic preservation, I don't consider this accidental preservation. Looks pretty deliberate, but I guess my question to you with that phrase in mind is there something you wish you had learned in your training and your education about historic buildings, or are you glad that you didn't?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, Robert was just telling me that there's a lot of interest, a lot of questions about preservation from students that are coming in. Boy, I don't know. I mean, we started renovating buildings because those were the opportunities that were given to us, and over time we became interested in the preservation piece of it. In the beginning, I think we were probably like, not going to do that. That's for somebody else. We were doing contemporary staircases next to a terracotta building that just happened to not have been torn down. So, I don't know. I mean, after school, I went to Europe 4 years after the wall came down and had a chance to teach in Dresden for 3 years with a professor of mine from Berkeley. And I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but that was everything. That had a huge influence in finding the right way to put new things and old things together. And sometimes you do restore, you do proper preservation restoration. Sometimes you don't. So I don't know. I'm happy with how I turned out for now. It depends on the building. Depends on the building and what two stories about that. One would be, sorry, I'm going to go to that last slide. On the far right, this was an apartment building that was a preservation project. I don't think it was state and federal historic tax credits, but they got some credits. This is Mac Properties too that did the Genie Gang building. But I mean, in this case, we were perfectly fine, just investigating color and paint sheens and that kind of stuff. When we get into really significant issues of preservation, Trivers is doing the window rehabilitation package for the Crendon Martin buildings, for example. If there's really a specific important interior preservation issue, we'll bring in specialists. We're really not specialists in preservation. We just know how to pull all the pieces together and hopefully create room for the people that are experts to do the work that they do. But paint color and paint sheens are just never-ending topics. We're renovating I love this. We're rehabbing a mid-century modern dorm at the University of Arkansas right now, Yoakum Hall. There's two of them. There's Humphreys and Yoakum right next to each other. The students call them Humpty Dumpty. Humphreys hasn't been touched since 1962, not touched at all. Like the electricians won't go near the electrical closet. But it's a great reference because the terrazzo floor is amazing, and some of the detailing is incredible. So we can go look at it while we're renovating the other one that's been kind of bastardized over time. But paint. So right now we're just doing window profiles and reconfiguring the entry to the door. It's got to be made accessible. There's a classic '60s folded concrete plate canopy. But in that case, it's not a proper preservation project because it's a state project. So we feel comfortable enough working on window profiles and color. Carmen, you had a question.
Oh, first, great work.
Thank you.
It's great to see. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about just maybe advice primarily about starting a practice. And also I was thinking about it starting in a place like Kansas City or mid-size, Midwestern, or
Yep.
thinking about the differences and
Yeah.
what the opportunities might be for the future in mid-sized cities.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we didn't know what we were doing, which is probably a key ingredient. And it was, I grew up in Kansas City, so it was easy for me to be there. And we just, in this neighborhood, I mean, there were just, let's see if I can get back to that picture, but like, people were just kind of, in an impromptu way, showing up really around. There was a gallery called the Dolphin Gallery, which now is Hall Contemporary. It evolved into Hall Contemporary in Kansas City, but John threw great parties, and the artists loved him, and the Art Institute was there. So every year there was a new wave of students. It was like Hallmark and the Art Institute were the regenerative engines that brought new people into Kansas City. And they would all hang out at the Dolphin. So we were hanging out at the Dolphin, and I think the Dolphin is probably right around where number 14 is. Yeah, right where 14 is. So we just, like the opportunity was, nobody was, I mean, they're good firms in Kansas City, of course. Steve Abend Singleton, BNIM, all the sports architecture firms, Huft is there. But the block building was a key moment. The block building signified that the community was ready for something else. So we were kind of waiting. We were looking for that clue. And when that happened, we're like, we're all in. We're going to do it. So, we were friends. We hung out all the time. There were 5 partners. There were 5 partners and a total of 7 people in the company. So it took us about 15 years to figure out that's not a good ratio. But, they're just these opportunities. One of the reasons I love this was the second building we did in 1998. Second building I worked on in 1998. And they're just, people were buying these buildings for no money. And I know that doesn't happen anymore anywhere, really. But the buildings were cheap. People really wanted to be here. Rents were cheap. We bought our own building 15 years ago. It was affordable to do that. So, I mean, my advice, I have been wondering lately, where would we be had we have an office in Portland now, which is, a hipper, cooler, more desirable place for a lot of people, but it has problems. It's expensive. We were named an emerging voice from the Architectural League in 2008, which is pretty early for us. And we thought, okay, we made it. We're like, we've been crowned. This is great. We went to New York. We gave a lecture at the New Museum and at Howard University with Dan and Amal from WorkAC. They were our partner. And we came back to Kansas City and we're like, where's the big commissions? And everybody was like, what? Like, get back to work. Like, we don't care about any of that. So it was really, I think the place had a lot to do with we were really focused. We were focused on what we wanted to do. We found really willing patrons, and now we really are, I have to remind myself, we want to do projects in Kent. We just finished the public television Station rehab. They treat themselves every 50 years to a rehab. That was a great project. We did the Kansas City Aquarium. But right now we have a large housing project, and that's it. Everything else is elsewhere. So that's a bit of we have more work in St. Louis than we do in Kansas City right now. So, and we have more work in Portland than we do in Kansas City. So, I mean, we were in Kansas City because we happened to be there and we made the most of it. And now we go where the work is and where the clients are. But no major regrets. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the building in Pittsburgh that you're working on?
It's not a building, it's a bridge. The West End Bridge, and it's not even the West End Bridge because it just needs to be preserved. And they're working on that. Actually, it's got some problems. We're working on the connections between the West End Bridge and the West End neighborhood and Manchester neighborhood. So it's a great project. I had it in here, but I had to cut it. That was part of the 250 slideshow. But no, it's great because the River Life is running the project. They tend to the kind of healthy interaction with the rivers in Pittsburgh, and Thornton Tomasetti, the engineers that did the timber bridge in New York that are working with us. It's a great project. But it's not the bridge. It's you can't get to the bridge if you're a pedestrian or on a bicycle. So it's the last. If you look at I can't remember what they call it, but there's a loop that goes all the way around the city, and that's the log jam in a connected system. We do a lot of that. We do a lot of bridges and like mobility infrastructure. I don't know why we do, but we do. All right.
One more?
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about working with artists and
Yeah.
how that impacts your thinking about your practice? And,
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, Bruce said it right. In the early days, we had an art gallery. We rented 10,000 square feet for $500 a month because there was nobody. The only people in the neighborhood, there was a strip club across the street. And they were great. They were great tenants, and they were actually they were great people. But we had a gallery, we had an architecture practice, which was incidental. We should be accidental architects. Truly, it was like, one partner who isn't with us anymore never fully resigned from BNIM. He was on extended leave for 18 years. Okay, so there was a shop in the basement, 5,000 square feet. We only used a corner of it. And then upstairs, we used about 4,800 square feet as a gallery, art gallery. And then we had a little space in the front where we worked. And it was the neighborhood. This is how we got into like community engagement and urban planning. We were building a neighborhood, and we would invite people over to our house. And it just happened to be an art gallery, and we got to know all the artists in the neighborhood. And we just found we really liked being with them and talking to them. And they challenged us to think about our projects in ways that no architects were challenging us to think. And so it just kind of evolved naturally. And a couple of those artists, we branched out, and we either mingled in their practice or they mingled in ours, and it just became part of the DNA. So we really do, and right now, I think we have 6 collaborations with artists going on. The West End Bridge that I was talking about, there's a group out of Calgary called Saint Fasson, a French architect and a British artist who are really great friends of ours. They're on that project. We don't know what they're doing yet, but they've been doing some work with the city of Pittsburgh in the Parks Department. So the city loved them, and they enrich the stories of the work that we do. So it just is really, Bruce, you saw it in the conversations we had with Jim and Marcy with the students. I think in many ways, at least for younger students, an art education might be a good, I feel bad saying this because I'm an architectural educator, but an art education's not a bad education for an architect in the beginning. And when I went to WashU, it was the last vestiges of Lasky. So I felt like in many ways, we were part of the Bauhaus studio kind of structure. So I feel like I got a little bit of that. So I can blame WashU for that. No, but it's really,
But I went to an estate sale for Lasky. I'm not a student, I'm new to St. Louis. I was so fascinated by him just going through his things.
Yeah.
That house was incredible, his things.
yeah,
I went there 3 times, came home with truckloads of things.
yeah. Yeah, I caught the tail, well, not the tail end, but close to the tail end of his time.
He retired in '83, but still active for many, many
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. No, it was great. I mean, I really do. Now it's blended, but at the time, the Fine Arts School and the Architecture School were really close. This Steinberg was where everybody came together in the library, or lots of friends were, fine arts students, so it probably did start here. Okay, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.